Hey guys, welcome to our latest video for Form 1. We have a combination video today. We're going to be talking about both the renal system and the endocrine system. First, let's talk about the structure of both of these systems. The renal system is mostly the work of kidneys, but you could also consider it one and the same as the urinary system, which would include the ureters, bladder, and urethra as well. The endocrine system has many different players, including structures in the brain, such as the hypothalamus, pineal gland, and pituitary gland, structures near the throat area, which include the thyroid and parathyroid glands, and structures in the abdominal cavity, like the pancreas, which we already talked about with the digestive system, and the adrenal glands, which are on top of the kidneys, and finally the gonads, or the reproductive parts of men and women, primarily talking about testes in the men and ovaries in the women. All of these endocrine structures are essentially working as glands to secrete hormones that send messages out to other locations in our bodies, both near and far locations, and this is necessary for our body to communicate. So now we're going to talk about some of the individual functions of these systems. The renal system, especially the kidneys, has many functions, including homeostasis of the fluid around our cells and in our bloodstream, including regulation of fluid volume, electrolyte composition, and acid-base balance. The renal system, including those urinary structures, is also responsible for excretion of fluid waste, whether it be metabolic waste products or foreign substances and toxins. Finally, the renal system has endocrine functions, such as regulation of blood pressure, production of red blood cells, and calcium metabolism. Then when we move to the endocrine system, as we said before, it's essentially a bunch of hormones getting sent through the body to communicate what needs to happen at certain times. This hormonal regulation is necessary for the stress response, for reproduction, metabolism, and growth. Thus, the endocrine system is extremely important since it affects such a variety of bodily functions. And the question that you may be wondering is, why are we talking about these two systems together? How do they collaborate? I'd like to talk about two specific ways that these systems collaborate. First, they work together to regulate blood pressure. And second, if someone has diabetes, their renal and endocrine systems are both affected. So let's take a look at these two ways they collaborate. Let's start by discussing how the renal and endocrine systems collaborate to regulate blood pressure. Say your blood pressure starts to get low. The brain will detect this, and a message is sent to the pituitary gland, which releases the hormone vasopressin. This is also known as the antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. ADH is a hormone that is sent through the bloodstream all the way to the kidneys to let them know that the blood pressure is low in the body. The kidneys then respond by increasing the amount of water that they put back into the bloodstream after they filter it. Thus, the blood volume increases, and this results in increased blood pressure. The endocrine system provided the hormones, or the signal, to tell the body that the blood pressure was low. And when it sent that signal to the kidneys, they made the necessary change to blood volume in order to increase the pressure. Finally, let's discuss how diabetes affects both the renal and the endocrine systems. First, we need to take a look at the functional unit of the kidneys. We know that the kidneys are filtering blood and then either putting things back into the bloodstream or sending them to the bladder to be excreted. The actual structure that does this filtering is called a nephron. And you can see them right here. You have the blood vessels inside of the kidney, and then there are over 1 million nephrons inside of each kidney in your body. And those are basically these winding tubules, and then extending into this longer portion. And then this larger tubule in the middle is called the collecting duct. Once the fluid has been filtered through the nephron, whatever's left over is sent to the collecting duct to be combined with all the rest of the waste from all these other nephrons, and then that gets compiled as urine and sent through the ureter down to the bladder. If we were to zoom in on one of these nephrons, we would see that there is a blood vessel that lies right next to, so there's your blood vessel, lies right next to what's called the Bowman's capsule. And this is the backwards C-shaped structure right here on this end of the nephron. Once that blood filters into the nephron at this location, it goes through the rest of the nephron tubules, where certain electrolytes, sugars, proteins, fluid are all being reabsorbed back into the blood, or sent to the end of the nephron where it's collected and gets sent to make urine. Now, in a normal, healthy person, all of this glucose or sugar that they have in their blood gets reabsorbed back into the blood after it's filtered into the nephron. There's no need to have glucose in the urine in a normal, healthy person. However, if someone has hyperglycemia, which might be the case in somebody with diabetes, hyper meaning too much or excessive amount, glyc referring to sugar, and emia, a condition of the blood, so we have too much sugar in the blood. If somebody has hyperglycemia, this blood is getting filtered into the nephron, and normally all the sugar would be reabsorbed back into the blood. But in this case, there's so much sugar inside of that fluid in the nephron that it overloads the channels that would allow it back into the bloodstream, and thus there is still glucose in this fluid once it gets sent to be excreted in the urine. So you have sugar in the urine. This also causes more fluid to be retained in the tubule here and then comes out in your urine. So by retaining more fluid because of the sugar present, you have to urinate more frequently, aka polyuria. And if you're urinating a lot and losing that fluid, you might get polydipsia, or frequent thirst. Thus, diabetes definitely affects how the renal system functions. Now, I want you to figure out what diabetes has to do with the endocrine system. We just talked about its role in the renal system, how it affects the urine production, and how this is happening at the level of this nephron right here, zoomed in. So I want you to figure out, what does diabetes have to do with the endocrine system? I'm looking specifically for the cause of diabetes, both in type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus.